Good afternoon, Saitlanders. How are you? We hope that you are well. For those of you who are unaware of it, who haven't been following it, I urge you to become aware of the very dramatic events that are happening in the world of finance, in both banking crises, and the dollar crisis. The two are not one and the same thing. But if you imagine a human body and you get a thorn in your foot, your right foot, and then you wrench the ligaments or the tendons in your left knee. Between the two unrelated events, the body becomes immobile. At the moment, there is a crisis in banking all over the world. And in the most simplistic layman terms, that crisis can be reduced to being caused by two things. The one is derivatives, and I've explained derivatives to you before. It's where you bet on stocks, and then other people bet on your bet, and then others bet again on those bets. Imagine, I've used this illustration before, skip forward if you've heard it half a dozen times already. Imagine you have a small hall, a church hall or a scout hall or something like that, hosting a boxing match. And there are just 100 seats, and the ticket prices are 100 Rand a ticket, and that comes to 10,000 Rand. And that's the purse, and it costs 1,000 Rand to hire the hall, and it costs 1,000 Rand to hire the chairs, and it costs 1,000 Rand for something else, and that leaves 7,000 Rand. And the winner takes 4,000, and the loser takes 3,000. That's the deal. And then you have, sitting in the front row, two people, and perhaps it's not very noisy yet in the hall. You perhaps in row 3 with your friend, and you overhear two people in the front row take a bet on the fight. You overhear the one say, I'm telling you the guy in blue is going to win tonight. I'm telling you. And the other person says, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. The guy in red, he's 10 times better. And the first person says, yes, but he's had flu the whole week long. I know his sister's cousin, okay? And so it goes on, and they take a bet. People with money, they're in the front row, the local well-to-do people in the suburb, and they appreciate boxing. One's a dentist, one's a doctor, and they take a bet of 10 grand. And you are a successful person, you've got a good business, it's a Friday, you've got a trading shop in Randburg, you've done 3 million rands worth of turnover. You're not the richest person in the world, but you've got money. And you're there with your other Lebanese or Greek or Portuguese buddy. He's also got some Tom. He didn't want to go to Carnival City tonight. You and he are watching the boxing. You're going to get an early night. By 10 o'clock you'll be home. And you say to your friend, I bet you that chick, the first two people in the front row were women. Lady doctor, lady dentist. I bet you that chick is going to lose. I'm telling you now, she's talking absolute rubbish. Look how she's dressed. Look at her makeup. Look at the rings on her fingers. She's not a boxing aficionado. She's just here to pose. Watch the blood fly. Talking nonsense. Blooming doctor. And your friend says, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 10 to 1 on their bet. You say, done deal. That 10 to 1 multiplies the 10 grand potentially to 100,000 rand. Now, in the financial world, excuse me, what has happened over many years is that a superabundance of money has led to reckless bets being taken on inferior companies and poor products. The classic example is the Nikola. You know, like we have the Tesla, there was that scam, the Nikola, the company that was producing vehicles, and it turned out that they were staging the videos of the vehicles. You know, this is our prototype, see how well it runs, fantastic, sun in the background, fancy 4K camera. Those cameras, they were using what they call a Dutch tilt to make the ground look level, to correct for the fact that actually the truck was freewheeling without an engine down a slope somewhere in the Arizona desert. Now, people put money into that. I'm going to pause here and take a big swig of water. Give me a second. Now, many people, pension funds included, individuals, people who received their pensions and had that sort of classic jealousy/envy where they'd worked for the man for 9 hours a day for 40 years while watching their less well-educated, less bright high school friends go into plumbing and into the KFC and become millionaires many times over. Thinking, I can do it. He was a chump at high school. He did everything on lower grade. He's got 5 KFCs. Let me take my... I know I can't go wrong. I don't even have to think about it twice. I know him, I know me. We sat next to each other in biology. Many, many, many investments have been made in very, very poor businesses in recent years because there was a superabundance of money printed in recent years. And people have speculated upon speculations. I mean, there was a time when Tesla, for instance, had never declared a profit. So it didn't even have a price to earnings ratio. And people were investing in it, knowing that it couldn't possibly compete with Audi and Volkswagen and Toyota and Mercedes once they really got into the electric vehicle thing. Tesla couldn't possibly stand a chance in the long term. And it had never made a cent. And people would put... Okay, so those derivatives, in other words, bets upon bets, speculations upon speculations, bets upon bad bets, speculations upon bad speculations, are coming home to roost. They are unresolved. They are unsettled and have been sitting on many banks' books for a long, long time. And they are weighing down the banking system globally. And that is exacerbated by, I told you there were two things, very much exacerbated by the fact that for a long time, the biggest banks in the world were able to obtain money for 0% interest. I did a video perhaps 3 years ago in which I described how you could take loans for a minus interest rate. In other words, you borrow 100,000 and you pay 99,000 back over 20 years, 10 years, 5 years in certain places. Germany was one place. There was a category of mortgage bonds that you could get for a minus interest rate. Now that the interest rates have gone up, people can't pay back. Not even ordinary consumers like you and me, ordinary people. Banks can't pay back. Many banks in the world are sitting with loans books that are unfeasible. Coupled with that, this financial crisis in the world, there is an assault upon the dollar, as I described earlier. And it entails many things. But in brief, the dollar has special cachet, special prestige, special value. It attracts special interest for three primary reasons. The one is that it is the currency of last resort. In other words, it is the currency against which all currencies are measured through the Bretton Woods system, and we don't have to go too much into that. The second is that it is the mediator of international transactions. As I've explained previously, if I buy a pair of tackies from China, I am under the impression that I'm paying 10 rand for 100 won, 100 renminbi, Chinese renminbi. But actually, I'm paying for dollars. And then the dollars is measured against the won, the renminbi. Dollars mediate at every bureau de change in the world. When you go to a bureau de change in Iceland, and you arrive on the aeroplane and you step out there with your randellas, and you go to the bureau de change, you've got to pay now in Icelandic kronor or in Danish kronor. No, Icelandic kronor. Sorry, Danish kronor is Greenland. Oh, geez, I could have messed that up. You think that it's an exchange, that a rand is worth this many kronor. It's not. A rand is worth that many dollar, and the kronors are worth however many dollar or dollars. It mediates. And the third reason why the dollar is what it is, in terms of its value and its strength, is because of the petrodollar. And that comes from a deal done between Henry Kissinger on behalf of Richard Nixon with the bigwigs in Saudi Arabia in the 1970s, whereby the Saudis would persuade the rest of OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, in other words, those countries, mostly Arabian, especially at that time, that produced a lot of oil but consumed very little. Therefore, they were, for all intents and purposes, exporting countries. Whereas the United States of America and Canada and other countries did produce oil, but what they exported was much less than what they consumed. By and large, they consumed whatever they produced. The same with North Sea oil, Norwegian oil, and British oil, in the North Sea of Scotland. Okay. So the deal was that the Saudis would persuade their OPEC chomas to only accept dollars for oil purchases. Just because. Never mind anything, just because. And therefore, a country like South Africa importing oil in the 70s, 80s, 90s, right up until now, would always place a heavy emphasis on foreign exchange. Why? Why do we need all this foreign exchange? People talking about foreign exchange. Why can't we just pay with rands? What's wrong? Why can't we change the rand? It's 18 rand to the dollar. I'll give you 18 rand for a dollar's worth of oil or tackies or whatever the case may be. No. If you wanted to buy oil, you had to pay in dollars. So you had to find the foreign exchange. And that's why foreign exchange is so important, or one of the reasons. In recent weeks, you know that there have been some failures of banks, particularly in the USA, and there have been some very close shaves elsewhere in the world, notably Credit Suisse in Switzerland. And there is a lot of talk about some banks, most particularly in the whole world, most particularly, but not only by any stretch of the imagination, there are many, but most particularly Deutsche Bank of Germany. These banks are in a very, very, very bad way for the reasons I described earlier, because of the huge derivatives books that they have, the huge bets that they've placed that have failed, the huge speculations that they've made because they had a superabundance of money. It was raining money from federal banks. They took everything that they could at 0% interest or 0.1% interest or 1% interest, and they threw it at whatever they could. 70% of the time they were wrong. They were stupid, reckless bets by lady doctors coming to watch a fight because she's got enough money, but she doesn't know anything about it. And lo and behold, you and your friend think you're clever to bet on the pretty lady in the front row because you've got Tom, it's a Friday, you've had a good trading week, you actually don't care about 100 grand. You know, some people are like that with money. If they've got a lot of it, it's okay, it's their money, they made it. And lo and behold, at the end of the night, the 10,000 rand boxing event that only had 10,000 rands worth of intrinsic, inherent value in it, became not truly worth, I'm going to use the word worth just because, became worth, supposedly, 100,000, 110,000, 120,000. And for the most part, it's money lost that couldn't be somehow recovered through intrinsic value. In other words, I bought a share, it didn't do well, I sold it, I only lost 10%, I didn't lose the shirt off my back. No, I was betting on a bet, on a product from a company that was not worth a fraction of what that bet had become over time. So the losses can't be resolved through me eventually coming home to my wife and saying, my darling, I'm sorry, I lost 10,000 rand tonight, but hey, I've got a 9,000 rand gold ring that came out of the deal, or 9,000 rands worth of shares, or 9,000 something. No, it can't be. So these derivatives books and the loans that these companies have taken, so it's kind of interrelated, whose interest rates have climbed in recent years, indeed in recent months, they can't pay them back. And they're sitting with these bad debts, these derivatives books. Now, couple that with what has been done to the dollar. Couple that with the fact that the dollar is being undermined by a number of enormous initiatives. For instance, Saudi Arabia is betraying its former agreement with the USA, which it's entitled to do. It's not a formal written, but they've kept the agreement for 40 years, 45 years. Now all of a sudden, almost 50 years, and the Saudis are saying, that was then, this is now. We'll sell oil for Chinese yuan. And the Americans suddenly become irrelevant, or the dollar suddenly becomes irrelevant. And it loses some of its cachet and prestige. Similarly, you have, as has happened in recent days, the Chinese and the Brazilians say, aside from oil, aside from the petrodollar, we're talking about now about the dollar being a mediator between currencies. Like when you exchange money, you go on holiday to the Maldives, you think you're buying Maldivian, whatever they are. You're not. You're buying dollars, and the dollars are buying the Maldivian things, and then they're being given to you. The Chinese and the Brazilians are two huge economies. And the Chinese and the Iranis, and the Chinese and the Russians, and the Chinese and dear me, I was reading about this just the other day, and a few other countries. Some of them are minor, Sudan and Zimbabwe and places like that. But nevertheless, it's adding up. Are saying, forget the Yanks. I believe that your Brazilian real today, it's whatever time, I reckon it's worth 10 renminbi. If we make the deal now, if you put the money in the bank now, if it's cleared within 24 hours or whatever the case may be, whatever the terms are, I'll send you, 100 wons worth of, I don't know what, from China. Plastic sandals, dresses, who knows, rubber fittings, hose clamps, big screen television mounts, whatever it may be, mountings, I should say. Again, the dollar is all of a sudden being excluded. And this is happening rapidly every day. Every single day. Those of you on my WhatsApp groups, that is to say, Saitlander's leadership WhatsApp groups, will be familiar with what I've been posting since 4 o'clock this morning. And yesterday morning, I think I started at sometime after 2 a.m. in the morning. It's happening all the time. It's unbelievable. And then lastly, we have the dollar as the global reserve currency. Now that still exists, except that people are saying that since 1971, in fact since 1973, but it's very complicated and we needn't go down there and try to be too clever. The dollar has not been backed in gold, backed by gold. So why should I trust your bonds, the debt that you issue? Let's say you want to buy a Coburg, you want to build a Coburg nuclear station. It's 1960s or 1970s South Africa. Your budget is this big. You've got to spend that much on Department of Education, that much on the Bantustans, golly gee, that much on defense. We can't afford to start erecting Coburg. How are we going to do this? There's a way that governments have practiced for literally thousands of years. They say, we're South Africa. We're not going anywhere. No, we have good days, we have bad days, but we're here. We're stable. You can depend on us. So if we issue a bond for 100 Rand, you pay 100 Rand, give us 100 Rand. That is the way that we will raise money. But it's a debt. A bond is a debt. It's government debt. I now owe you, as the government, I owe you. I must pay you back. Obviously. What's happening is that countries in the world who have held these bonds, who have loaned money to the USA for many, many, many years, are all of a sardine, as my dad would say, saying, you know what? We actually have lost confidence and faith in the dollar. Now in the year 2023, now all of a sardine, we think you've been tricking us. You're backed by nothing. Your economy is not doing well. Your budget doesn't balance. Your GDP is no longer the greatest in the world. And we believe that you're diddling the figures anyway. You're lying to the world about how well you're doing. So we're going to sell your bonds And when we do that, the whole world is going to lose confidence in them. So in order for you to sell bonds in the future, you're going to have to offer special deals. You're going to have to offer returns that are not feasible. This video is already 25 minutes long. I hope that it's been helpful in educating Saitlanders as lay people about the very severe crisis that is happening in global finance and in the dollar, in global banking, which is finance, and the dollar and the related bonds and so on. It's a very complicated, very, very, very complicated two subjects, left leg and right leg, working together to hamstring the USA at present. Of course, we're not seeing the full effects right now. These things don't happen overnight. It takes time. It'll take weeks and months and years. But it's happening at a pace that is unprecedented. I said in one post on my international group this afternoon, speaking to Saitlanders, foreign friends and foreign supporters on that WhatsApp group, I can personally, I might be wrong, maybe I didn't give it enough thought, I can only think of two events, or three I should say, that remotely compare to what is happening now to the dollar and global banking and the transition away and the new world order, as it were, among the Chinese and their allies and the BRICS. But let's not complicate things too much by talking about the BRICS currency. That compare for scale and rapidity. And that's the first and second invasions of Iraq and the invasion of Afghanistan. Enormous events that cost billions of dollars, last for years and years and years, and happen overnight. All of a sudden, weapons of mass destruction, push it through the United Nations Security Council, send all the ships and the aircraft overseas, start bombing the hangout of them, invade Iraq. But even those events don't really compare, in my opinion, as I said on that group, for scale. Not really. They don't come close to how Russia, because Russia is very heavily involved in this Chinese-driven initiative. Russia, China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and others are changing the whole face of trade and the relevance of the dollar. And also too, those three invasions do not, in my opinion, nearly compare to the scale of the crisis in global banks. It is enormous. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching this video. Please like, share, subscribe, and God bless all of you for the next 18, 24 months, which promise to be severely rocky. Very severely rocky. Hang in there. Together we can. Together we really can. There has always been a remnant. Bye-bye.